Hello, my name is JD20, and in today's episode of Spell Focus, I'm going to talk about True Strike for a bit, going into the details of how it works, some obvious flaws that it has now, some improvements to look forward to in the future, and some fun ways to flavor the spell for your games. If there are any spells that you'd like to see in the next episode of Spell Focus, or if there's anything else that you'd like me to cover, leave a comment down below, and while you're there, hit the subscribe button, it helps a lot. True Strike is a cantrip that you could take as a bard, sorcerer, warlock, or wizard, but there's no real reason to. With a casting time of 1 action, a 30-foot range, verbal somatic components, concentration for a minute from the divination school, it seems as though it's just any other cantrip. It allows you to point a finger at a target within range, and on your next turn, you gain advantage on your first attack roll against the target, provided that this spell hasn't ended. After that turn, your concentration on the spell ends. Now, as is the case with all of the other cantrips that have been in previous episodes of Spell Focus, there are feats that you can use to take this cantrip, but as it currently is, don't. Unless you're running a very specific build that is some amazing amalgam of making True Strike good, in which case, props to you. But for everyone else playing the game, don't take it. The fatal flaw of True Strike that has been explained to death, especially here on YouTube, is the fact that it requires an action to give you advantage on the first attack of your next action, wherein you could instead make 2 attack actions. Instead of rolling 2d20 on your next turn, you roll 1d20 on the turn you would have cast True Strike, and another d20 on the next turn. It's the same 2d20, one just makes a lot more sense. Especially because if you drop concentration on True Strike before you're able to use it, it's gone. Which honestly just kind of sucks. But if you ever do find yourself in a situation where True Strike could be a little bit beneficial, there are some fun ways of flavoring it. For the charisma casters and their capacity to utilize their charismatic magics, you could imbue a sense of that very magic into whatever weapon you are using for your attack roll, and embody that very nature of the magic accordingly. The True Strike, you could almost consider it a magical autocorrect, where instead of having a shaky hand, as is typical of most, not hexblades, but most casters, it is instead guided by your magic to allow you a strike that hits true. You can see where the name comes from. What is worth noting, though, is that the 2024 Player's Handbook will most likely have a better option for True Strike. A divination cantrip given, of course, to bard, sorcerer, warlock, and wizard, with a casting time of an action, a range of yourself, and with the components of somatic and material utilizing a weapon with which you have proficiency, with an instant duration. Instead of the format of True Strike that you're familiar with from the 2014 rulebook, 2024 instead opts to allow you to make an attack with the weapon that you use in the spell's casting as that material component, which will then use your spell casting ability for the attack and damage rolls instead of strength or dexterity. In addition, if that attack deals damage, it can be radiant damage or the weapon's normal damage type, which you get to choose. And, to top it all off, when you choose to deal radiant damage or the normal weapon damage type, the attack deals extra radiant damage at 5th levels, 11th level, and 7th level, dealing 1d6, 2d6, and 3d6 additional, respectively. This is a massively improved buff to True Strike and takes what was the cantrip of memes and makes it the genuinely viable design of what could be the very namesake of True Strike. And even though it's not out yet, it's so much more fun to think of the possibilities of the flavor of True Strike in this form, taking your magic and almost charging it in such a way that it begins to glow with that radiant energy, and in channeling it through the weapon that you wield, you almost make it into the sort of spell that you seek to cast, and can embody that sort of caster's nature through the strike that you make with the weapon, only getting stronger and stronger as your capacity as a bard or a warlock, sorcerer, or what have you, gets better along with you. That capacity that you could have to channel the very magic through True Strike itself gets better alongside you. Of course, that's just looking ahead to the 2024 rulebooks, which do True Strike, along with several other cantrips, quite better than the 2014 rulebook. If there are any other comparisons that you'd like me to make between 2014 and 2024, or any sort of tips and tricks that might help you prepare for the jump from 5th edition to whatever they decide to call this edition, please let me know in the comments down below. I am more than excited for it. I'll be making this journey just the same as everyone else playing Dungeons & Dragons, and I am highly looking forward to changes like this and many more that are to the benefit of the players. Now, unfortunately, we don't have the cool True Strike yet. We're just stuck with the less reliable, less dependable, and more memed to death younger cousin. But if you do find yourself in a situation where, if it's for some sort of joke build, or if in a genuine sincerity you find there being a niche that True Strike fills, there's nothing wrong with looking at it as an option, especially if it fits your build. Even if for a majority of every other player character it's not going to fit, if you look at your build and you want to take it, go for it. Don't let people stop you. If you really wanted to make True Strike work, with the cost of it being an action, I would really only recommend taking it if you were a sorcerer who was trying to be a sort of spellblade, in that you can utilize your meta magics just that little bit more, maybe to make it just a little bit better. The only problem is you only gain the advantage on your next turn, but using a bonus action for the cantrip will still allow you to spend your turn with your action to do something else, perhaps in preparation. And then on your next turn, after you've cast some sort of spell, maybe a AoE spell that can really deal some good damage to everyone, you can then sneak in for a good critical strike with advantage and really take advantage of that True Strike. Or in some sort of scenario where you've taken True Strike via a feat or gain it from some sort of magic item, it does have some practical benefits if you were to pick a fighter with Action Surge. Though most would laugh at the thought of it, you could use your Action Surge to cast True Strike if you don't have any movement and if you don't have any other option. It is a spell that you, in fact, can use. The biggest penalty that you're going to want to avoid for True Strike, though, is most especially trying to limit that action economy tanking that it is so easily capable of doing to a deceptive degree, for new players especially. If you know what you're doing, there are definite benefits to True Strike, and I do very much enjoy the idea of making it weapon related, but in the 2014 rules, it specifies an individual target within range. If you want to add a little bit of flavor to that description specifically in the concept of your strike hitting true and this sort of grandiose idea of allowing you to see into your target's defenses, rather than benefiting the weapon itself, you could use True Strike as sort of an augment to your own person. A Hexblade Warlock might be able to utilize True Strike as their sword whispering words of advice, pointing out weaknesses in the enemy's armor, and, though perhaps with some unknown motives, showing your foes' utmost failings in their means of defending themselves so that you can strike true. I have no idea how many times I'm going to say that in this video. If you keep track, let me know down in the comments. Likewise, with some of the characters like Bard and Sorcerer that are inherently capable of receiving this feat, it could be, or cantrip, it could be better utilized as a concept more for the study of your enemy, your magic around revealing the nature of your intended focus and where your actions should go. For those casters or otherwise that would gain it with a feat, that would be where your magic could benefit further. Or if you're going for a half-caster or a martial class, True Strike could be an observation-based ability, wherein your senses alert you to the weaknesses of your opponent themselves. Of course, whether you're using True Strike as written to study your foes, or if you're looking ahead to 2024 to use True Strike to better your own blade and strikes accordingly, True Strike will hopefully do whatever you need it to at the table, and hopefully in the future will do a lot more for everyone else. As always, feel free to leave a comment about anything you might want to see me talk about next, from published content to homebrew creations and more. While you're down there, go ahead and leave a like and subscribe if you haven't. Helps me out quite a bit. And let me know if there's anything you'd want to see from me in the future. And I'll see you in a bit.